Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and we are going to talk everything about Def Leppard, go through their entire discography. This is going to be awesome. Let's get rocked.
You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 232, Def Leppard with Metal Jesus Rocks.
Wow, okay, somebody has been doing their homework, so that's good.
Hosted by Dan Terry.
Joe's just ripping the scab off.
And Joseph Wren. Let's go back to you with the boombox. Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you Armageddon it with a BFG and a super shotgun, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. Metal Jesus Rocks is here.
Hey, man. Thanks for having... Hey, man. Hey, mans.
Hey, man.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to this. I've been listening to way too much Def Leppard this week, both the good and the bad. So this is going to be... It's going to be a pretty interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm feeling really good that you said that there's some bad, because I was a little nervous about what I was allowed to say, whenever we're going through it. Because, I mean, just like any band, though, when you have 11 records, there's no way that's going to be 11 home runs. Just, even when we did Iron Maiden a few weeks back, there were some albums that we were like, yeah, I'm not sure. Mostly it's good, but, There's always something to nitpick, but yeah, this is super exciting, and this was definitely a trip for me, because I'm not used to listening to anything from the 80s. I've always been a 90s kid and on, and Joe is slowly starting to open my eyes to, hey man, there were actually some pretty good bands in the 80s. You can't go into it with the same sort of expectations that you have with modern music.
He's not telling the whole story. He goes all the way back to the 60s and says nothing but good things about Black Sabbath. I almost said Def Leppard. You can tell where my mind is right now. He jumps forward to the 90s, and I'm like, dude, you passed up the Mötley Crüe, you passed up Def Leppard. There's some Whitesnake in there. Bon Jovi, when Bon Jovi was rock. Like, there's so much good shit.
Yeah, well, plus, and of course, like, the early Metallica, which I assume you do like, right?
Oh, yes.
The early Slayer, that stuff,
He's in denial about Metallica in the 80s being an 80s
band.
And
even a lot of the death metal bands that I like Carcass and stuff like that, that was all established in the 80s as well.
Yeah,
Napalm Death, so yeah, a lot of the stuff that I like now, I can kind of thank 80s bands for.
Yeah.
So.
Well, as we go through this, I mean, you're going to see that Def Leppard has definitely evolved over the years. Some may like it, some may not. So that'll be kind of the interesting part about this video and this discussion for sure, is talking about, Def Leppard and all the changes that they've gone through. So
I'm going to ask you right at the top, Metal Jesus. In the 80s, there are those that talk shit about hair metal.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. It's easy to make fun of, right? But what was good about hair metal was interesting rock songs with pop sensibilities, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, absolutely. That's what it was. I mean, there was definitely some cheese in there big time, especially towards the end of it. And, I live in Seattle, right? So we were part of the grunge era that kind of killed off hair metal. And so there was a lot of that going on when I was growing up and coming out of college, where, man, it was not cool to like 80s metal in any way. And so for, a lot of the 90s, people made fun of it. But it's funny how it's kind of come around. And in many ways, it's lasted longer than grunge has, for sure. I mean, a lot of these bands now, like Def Leppard, Mötley Crüe, all these, even some of the smaller bands, they're still touring, they're still putting out records, and they're still kicking ass, So it's lasted for sure. And I think you've hit on it. There's great musicality in there, great songwriting. Also people dig the look. Like, you go and you look at those old videos on YouTube, some of those Def Leppard ones, and it'll be filled with comments going, wow, this is the height of looking like a rock star. You know what I mean? Dressing up, not like an outfit on, you know what I mean? It was a cool time for sure. I loved it.
So the question is it Def Leppard's fault?
For what? For all the hair metal problems?
For all the hair metal, pop, heavy metal sensibilities that came later. A lot of people that I've talked to blame Def Leppard because, yeah, it was rock, but it was pop, really, is what it was.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to get to that. I think as we go through the discography, we're going to have discussions about how their music changed over time and the recording techniques and some of the things that they did with the especially, let's put it this way. I think Def Leppard and Bon Jovi, from an audio standpoint, changed how that music sounded for sure. And we're going to get into it when we get to Pyromania, that there are some definitive changes that happened on albums that really steered the course. I mean, without getting too far ahead, I mean, the very first time I heard a heavy metal rock song on the radio, it was Casey Kasem's Top 40 Countdown, and Rock of Ages was like number 5, and that was being played along with Journey and all sorts of other stuff at the time. But that was definitely a band that kind of along with Quiet Riot for sure. Yes. Metal Health at the same time was the first time I think that was the first time that there was a heavy metal album at number 1 in the Billboard top 100 was Quiet Riot. So there's to answer your question, there's a lot of bands at the time that sort of, and Rat, Round and Round, it was just like this time where it was right for hair metal to come along and introduce that sort of style, and the music videos and, the babes in the videos and all that sort of stuff. It was just, I ate it up as a little kid, man. I loved it.
It's too much for a 7 to 10-year-old to pass up. Yeah.
Yep. Also Van Halen too. You could make the argument as well. Like 1984 when that came out, there's just it was just, I guess what I'm trying to say is to put it all in Def Leppard. I don't think you could really do that. I think it's everyone at that time in competition with each other, upping their game with, the outrageousness of the tours and the outfits and the songs and the videos and all that stuff. And
yeah, 100%. No, that's
all culminating in basically Steel Panther today, bringing it all back home.
Thank you for Steel Panther.
I was gonna bring up Steel Panther. That, like, there's still obviously, and I'm gonna get into this too whenever we talk about the albums, because something that I've been paying attention to is Spotify stats whenever I'm listening to these records, because I don't, unfortunately, in case it's some kind of big secret, I don't own every single record that we talk about on this podcast. So there's a lot of times where I'll have to go and listen to Spotify or actually I'm actually subscribed to Spotify and YouTube Music is what it is now. Just so that I can get kind of a bigger spread, because even if Spotify doesn't have it, they've posted almost every album that ever exists up on YouTube. And so I pay for YouTube specifically so that I don't have to watch ads, so I can just listen to an uninterrupted album. Although the speed on some of those albums is sometimes suspect, because sometimes they speed it up or whatever to get around copyright and things like that.
Yeah.
But
that's annoying.
There's been times where I've been like, I didn't really like the vocals on this one. They were too high pitched, and everybody's looking at me like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, yeah, sorry. I didn't realize that. But before we get into Def Leppard, we are going to go into a few comments that we received on recent episodes. First of all, we had a comment on Facebook in regards to our Suffocation episode, which just really speaks to the variety of the type of bands that we talk about on this show, is how we'll go from Suffocation to Def Leppard, But Greg Mann says, finally having time to listen to podcasts again means I naturally started with the Suffocation episode. Hearing that makes me realize that you all should cover another legendary New York death metal band, the very band that literally coined the term slam. I'm talking about Internal Bleeding. Find me another band besides them and Dying Fetus that make just as much sense on a hardcore show as they do a death metal show. And he goes on to explain why Internal Bleeding and Suffocation need to be kind of like categorized together. So I appreciate that. We definitely have Internal Bleeding on the schedule, but I don't want to be a liar and tell you we're going to get to it right away. We've got so many bands, so many suggestions from listeners. It's turning into one of those things where we're going to get to everybody eventually. But
it's a good problem to have, man.
Yeah, I'm going to probably be 70 years old, 75 years old before we really get there. Over on Apple Podcasts, we got a 5-star review from Baldman Rich. Thank you very much, Richie. He goes, my favorite podcast. I first discovered this podcast just as a way to kill a subway ride when I found a review on one of my favorite bands, Ailstorm. Ever since then, I've been so invested. Dan and Joe know how to turn a podcast into a welcoming community of metalheads. They have a Discord and Patreon, which allows us to always stay in contact and speak my mind. I also once every month look forward to the hangout where we all have a blast, and I've now made some good friends. Thank you very much, Rich. We love hanging out with you every month on the Patreon hangout. Last time we did it, we did Jackbox games, which were just ridiculous. I was downstairs screaming and laughing so hard at the computer screen, and my wife was like, "What is going on down there? Like, why is he screaming and laughing? Like, he doesn't have that much fun whenever we're watching TV or doing family things." And last, we got a email from Jimmy. Jimmy says, "Hello, I'm new to podcasts in general. I'm 34 years old, and I just recently started diving into this world. I think it's so overwhelming, but luckily, the one podcast I found that I keep returning to is yours. I really enjoy hearing you guys talk about bands that I love, but also discussing bands that I've never heard of. I also want to submit a list of bands that I would love for you to possibly add to your queue. I wish you guys talked about EPs, but I totally understand why you don't. I checked to make sure that they haven't been done, and I apologize if I missed any." And then Jimmy left me a list of about 20 bands. I'm not going to read all of them right now, but there is one that I do want to talk about, and that he suggested Morbid Angel. We do have a Morbid Angel episode that is recorded. It's in the books. You guys haven't heard it yet, but it is coming out. And we did that with Scott Mellinger, the guitarist of Zao. You guys all know is my favorite band. So definitely check that out when it comes out. Thank you guys for emailing and commenting and sharing episodes. I've said it a million times before. I love it whenever I share an episode somewhere and my post gets deleted because one of you guys has already shared it. So again, it's like Joe said earlier, it's a good problem to have, and I definitely appreciate it. So keep that going. But now's what you guys are really here for. You guys didn't come here to hear me talk. We're gonna turn this over to Metal Jesus and say, Metal Jesus, tell us about Def Leppard.
Let's get to the Sparkle Lounge.
Wow. Okay, somebody has been doing their homework, so that's good.
Well, before Metal Jesus leads Dan and I into the Sparkle Lounge, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Well, we do love our 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. Like my friend Bald Man Rich left us a 5-star review. And you can do the same, and we will read it on the show just like we read his. And I would also love to take this opportunity to shout out our beloved patrons. You guys are the ones that keep us afloat every single month, and we appreciate you, and we appreciate hanging out with you once a month. And who are these Patreon subscribers? Well, I'm going to tell you who they are. We've got Lost Fiction, Kyle Driver, Timu Rantia.
You nailed it, dude.
Maybe I did. I don't know. We'll see. Let us know whenever we get it perfectly right. We've got Dangerous Dave, Ryan Rowe, Richard Renz, Big T. We've got Josiah Heiberg, Brandon Miranda, Ken Zapla, Tantalized Fungins.
Best name ever.
Jeremy Prince, Josh Moser, David Brown, Samuel Woodward, Brian Dean, It's Me, Brave. Lance Allagood,
the King of Metal,
Alexander, Patrick Asplund, and Jeffrey De Los Santos,
the actual Mac.
Thank you guys so much for your contributions every month. We really appreciate you, and you guys are largely why the show even still exists to this day. So thank you so much.
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily have like an official, history of Def Leppard or not, but they basically started many years ago. He mentioned EPs, so I'm just I know we're not gonna officially talk about this one, but this is their very first album right here. So this is the Def Leppard.
Wow.
This is the Def Leppard EP. Yeah. So, and actually, in all fairness, this is actually a reprint from Record Store Day a couple years ago.
Okay.
So Def Leppard actually is very active in Record Store Day, which is pretty cool. Actually, Def Leppard's really active in and re-releasing and doing a bunch of merchandising, which as a fan is a lot of fun. But anyways, getting back to Def Leppard as a band, I mean, the influence of them through the 80s is just, they were one of the top 5 rock, hair metal bands of the era. And, we were talking a little bit about sort of their influence. And yeah, for a lot of people like me, being a young kid, hearing them on Top 40 radio for the first time, when we were used to hearing not quite as heavy stuff, was life-changing. I mean, I remember the time I heard it for the first time on the radio, that Utah Gleaton Glouten Globen,
Yes.
Just sort of, it was cool. It was epic. And it happened at that right time. They were in the right place at the right time. Obviously that wasn't their first album right there, but they just hit when MTV and radio and it was ready for them. And I guess they technically came out of that new wave of British heavy metal. I think that's kind of what they're often associated with initially, but they quickly evolved into something more and something bigger than that, and transcending that. And so, that's kind of my synopsis.
Well, I have to say they're the most American sounding British band that I've heard in my life, because I didn't even know before we started whenever we decided to do this episode. I wasn't entirely sure where they were from. So whenever it turned out that they were actually an English rock band, it makes a ton of sense, especially considering the new wave of British heavy metal and all of that. Like I said, we talked about Iron Maiden a few weeks ago, and so whenever we start with their debut album in 1980, On Through the Night, this guy, oh yeah, you got it too. Yeah. Whenever we get to On Through the Night, this is where I think this is probably their most metal album, as far as like being what people would consider to be traditional metal without kind of mixing in a lot of those other styles, because I would consider for the most part Def Leppard to be a hard rock band. And so, I was actually really surprised by this whenever I listened to it, because I don't think I heard anything before Pyromania, prior to doing the episode. So I was actually really, really surprised by this one as to how metal it actually was. It was a little bit more in line with like your Iron Maidens and Saxon. Iron Maiden was a lot more extreme as far as being a little bit more like punk. This even on their first album, and this could just be because I listened to the remastered version, but it's not raw like some of those early. I'm thinking back to like Diamond Head and bands like that came out kind of around the same time, and this already from the get go has a sheen to it that a lot of these other bands didn't have. So like this record really, I actually enjoyed this one quite a bit. It was a great way for me to get started. Because I'm not going to lie, I wasn't really looking forward to listening to all of these, and this record definitely got me started on the right foot, because I was like, all right, I can chill with this. I like this, and I mean, songs like Rock Brigade, Hello America, Rocks Off, like it was cool. Sorrow is a Woman too is an extremely important song for them, because in my opinion, it's almost like a blueprint of what they were going to kind of go after, as far as them always having kind of those, I don't want to say a power ballad because it doesn't really start that way, but it definitely gets to that melodic space that the band was kind of known for.
Generally speaking, this album is not the Def Leppard that we all know. I don't know what the catalyst was that gave us this pop, sensible power ballad, like you said. I mean, when I heard Def Leppard for the first time, I'm pretty sure it was Pour Some Sugar on Me. So I get it. They had to get there. But this sounds more like classic Judas Priest to me, or Saxon, like you said. This is not the same Def Leppard that we've been hearing now for 40 years.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting album, and it wasn't, I don't think it was very popular at all. I think most fans like me discovered this album after we already liked Def Leppard, and we kind of went back, and I know initially when I heard this, I'm like, what? This is such a weird album, it's such a first band's album where you're like, oh, okay, this is a little rough compared to their new, the stuff that they would do. But going back now, I like it way more than I used to. Like you said, Rock Brigade, Hello America are classic songs. This album has one of my favorite riffs of any Def Leppard song, and that is Wasted.
Oh,
that is
yeah.
that is such a simple yet killer riff that I just love on this album. Also, too, this has a song in there. I think it's the When the Walls Come Down, where it's got that very cheesy 1970s, early 80s kind of like, in the first world of the first. It's got that guy talking in the beginning. Yeah. In the atomic wars, and you're just like, what the hell is this song? This is so cheesy. It's so bad, but it's pretty fun. So I dig it.
The Leopard was so tough.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's an album where I wouldn't definitely consider this part. It's not part of my top 5 Def Leppard albums, but I appreciate it more going back. And actually, as we get closer to Hysteria, Def Leppard ends up going back to this album in a really cool way. And so I'll talk about their live shows when we get closer to a little bit later in their career.
Yeah. I mean, I heard this and I was like, wow, these guys are like a metal band. Like I was a little bit like, man. So, and it's funny because like, there's something about 1980 where you're going to be either a band that sounds like a throwback from the 70s, which they are a little bit on that record. Or, they're going to go in this heavier direction. I know thrash wasn't really a thing. I think the heaviest music that was there in like 1980 was probably like speed metal. I know the speed metal was like going to be the big thing before thrash. And it just kind of like got completely run over by thrash. So it's like, are these guys going to go and are they going to take the metal thing and make it heavier and go in a more extreme direction? And they did not. And that's fine because I think that it's easy to trash a band, because this is something I've been thinking about while I've been doing the episode and listening to the albums is it's easy to trash a band for changing. I think that's the easiest, like most basic thing to trash a band for is like, well, you don't sound the same as you did on your first record. But I think in the case of Def Leppard, I think they would have run into a situation where they would have sounded like every other band that came out at that time. And this record is probably, in a lot of ways, their most generic as far as sounding like a band from that time period. And you can kind of see their influences on their sleeves. And so I wonder if like some of the metal elements were just like, well, this is what everyone's doing right now, so we're going to do it too. Whereas whenever we move into their next record, High and Dry, this is where you kind of start meeting the real Def Leppard.
1981. He's high and dry, but he is trying very hard not to be.
Such a weird cover, isn't it? I know, it's so bizarre. This album here is what a lot of old school Def Leppard fans consider to be their best album. And I'm not there. I think this would probably be my number 3 best Def Leppard album. I think it's a fantastic, let's put it this way. I think this album takes what they did on their first album and you can see where they're going, like the production. I think this is the first one where they work with Mutt Lange, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you see Mutt Lange's influence on this album big time, I think, because he is a guy who is not just a producer, he's a molder of bands, and he definitely is starting to push his influence a little bit here. But I mean, when we go through these songs, I like so many of them. High and Dry, You Got Me, Let It Go, Another Hit and Run, Lady Strange. Actually, some of my favorite songs on this album are the last 2 on side 2, which is Mirror Mirror and No No No. Those are pretty rocking tunes that are pretty cool. The other thing I want to mention about this too, it's kind of cool, is that, do you guys know what a lock groove is on a vinyl record?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, so this album has a lock groove on that no 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 part where he's like no no no, and
it just goes on
forever, which is really annoying. But it's one of those things where when you finish an album, sometimes you just let the needle spin at the end there. You won't do that with this album because that'll drive you crazy.
Oh wow. Yeah, that could be. I could see that being frustrated, but at the same time, if you're gonna have a lock groove somewhere, that's the perfect place to have it because you can just keep that going forever.
This is the song that doesn't end,
right?
Yeah, and actually they do 2 lock grooves because the next album has the lock groove as well, but it's a better one. So
did they do it on purpose? Did they do that on purpose, or was it just a? Oh,
Yeah, you have to do it on purpose because you basically have to do the run out, and it has to be perfectly timed at the end in order for that to work. The one on Pyromania is better because it's that drum groove, that whole thing that goes on forever. But that's at least cool.
Somewhere right now, a vinyl collector is cringing like really hard. See, I actually got a record recently from a band I love a lot that I've already mentioned tonight, and they re-released an album from like 1998, and it was its first time on vinyl, or maybe second time, but it had a locked groove in it, but it was definitely not intentional. It was also at a really awesome part too. But yeah, it was a locked groove. What I ended up having to do is I got like a monocle that had like 5 or 6, and I went in there with an X-Acto knife and I actually cut into the groove so that it would go to the next groove.
Oh, interesting.
You brave man.
You can hear it though. It makes a huge popping sound.
Usually it's the last groove on the record, and so it's designed like the Beatles very famously did it with Sgt. Pepper.
Right.
If you've listened to Sgt. Pepper, the very end of it has a da da ba da 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 ba da ba. It did that as well, and that was in like 67 or something like that. But it's usually the last groove on an album.
Yeah.
But anyways, I just want to mention that as a piece of trivia because a lot of people will maybe listen to this on Spotify going, why does it do that at the end for like a minute? And it's like, well, they're emulating that part of the vinyl record, the original release.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool that they did that, because even I was kind of wondering that as I was listening. I was like,
why is that going on so long?
Sounds like a record skipping, but I'm clearly at work listening to Spotify and I'm not listening to a record, right? So like, what does this mean? But no, like I really like this record because I thought that number one, I love the cover. And for me, sometimes even if I don't like the music that much, if the cover's awesome. And it's funny because I actually have this on cassette, and I wish I would have grabbed it beforehand. But I have this on cassette, and I never even noticed until we were doing this episode that there's no water in the pool. And it makes so much sense with High and Dry. It's just it's just something dumb that I did not really observe whenever I was doing it. And I was like, man, what is my problem here? Like, come on. But yeah, I was like, now it makes perfect sense. But yeah, I like this record because like it actually is in a lot of ways a heavier Def Leppard, and I think that's more to do with them having much better production value. Having, like the first record had a sheen for sure, but it almost sounded a little too clean at times. And I think almost unintentionally. Whereas I think the riffs hit harder on this record. They ring out longer. There's more almost like room noise in them. Like they feel powerful. And that's something that, we're going to get from now on, to the point where it's almost going to become annoying, where they are such a guitar heavy band. Which might sound ridiculous, obviously, talking about a band like Def Leppard, but like it's like the most duh statement I could make. But like they are one of the most guitar heavy bands, and that's actually what really attracted me to them on this record, was that they really, really take it seriously at a time where there were other 80s rock bands at the time that the guitar was almost like a secondary thought. Like they'd just come in and play their little like 3-note lead part, and then everything would drop out and it would just be drums and yada yada yada. Def Leppard's gonna get there, but on this record especially, this is I feel like kind of the golden era of the band, the beginning of the golden era, where it's like they can do no wrong. Every song's a hit. Every song is something that you're gonna listen to over and over and over and over and over again. And High and Dry, I think for the quote unquote true Def Leppard fans out there, that's the record that you want everybody to start with.
Yeah, and this wasn't a hit when it originally came out. It was only after Pyromania that was doing extremely well that record or the radio started playing Bringing on the Heartbreak, which is off this album, and then they remixed it or something like that for MTV. So yeah, it took Def Leppard a little while to kind of find their big moment for sure. But again, this is an easy one for I think a lot of Def Leppard fans to kind of come back to, and rediscover and realize how awesome it is. Well,
yeah, and I think all three of us can agree on this too. That like, as much as we like bands that maybe are more mainstream, there's always this feeling when you're listening to a record or a band where something wasn't necessarily made to be commercial. It was made because this was the record they wanted to make.
Yeah.
And that's largely how I feel about High and Dry. I don't feel like there was anybody whispering in the ear being like, well, if you guys did this, it would be a lot better, like that sort of thing. And so I don't hear any of that kind of corporate meddling that you're definitely going to start hearing later on.
It's one of those examples where you listen to Bringing On the Heartbreak and you think that's the moment that the executive said, we got to get a producer in here. These guys know how to write a song. We can do 10 of these for the next 30 years and money. So much money. And we could pick on that all night long because we know record labels get involved with records. That's why it's an industry, not somebody giving you money to live out your dream. But how good is Bringing On the Heartbreak when it kicks in?
Yeah.
And
I was going to say, I love, speaking of it, I love how it moves into a switch. What is that called? The instrumental switch 625 or whatever it's called. I love that. It's awesome. I know.
I'm just listening to it now thinking I can't relate to that fan that bought High and Dry and heard this for the first time, because to me, this is just one of the famous best Def Leppard songs. It's so good. It sounds raw in an Iron Maiden way from 1981, but it is so Def Leppard. All they got to do is turn up the reverb and put a few more layers on there, and you've got the formula, guys. So, yeah, I kind of wish they had stuck with their more heavy metal origin, but if you've got that skill, write a song and get people to sing along with it, why wouldn't you want to do more of that?
Well, yeah, and I think that that's the biggest thing that attracted me to kind of this band, because I mean, for all the listeners of the show that really listen to us to talk about bands like Opeth or Arch Enemy or, you know, those much heavier bands, they're probably like, what the hell are you guys doing talking about Def Leppard, you know? But at the same time, like, what attracted me to them was how well they could write a song just themselves. You know what I mean? Like, one of the biggest criticisms I give is like when a heavy band goes like in a more pop direction, I always say, like, if you're going to make pop music, at least make good pop music. And Def Leppard could already do that, kind of from the beginning. And so they had the chops to make songs that were going to be enjoyable. And that couldn't have been more evident on Pyromania.
Oh, it's time. 1983.
I know you keep putting up the album covers, but I'm holding mine too.
I'm thinking about just letting you do it because yours.
Let's just zoom in right here.
Yours are better than mine are. So
there you go.
I'm gonna let you have it.
Yeah. So this was the album. This is the album that put them on the charts. This is the one that introduced them to the world. And a little side note about this album, and you guys probably know this, but I'm going to mention it anyways, that I went to the University of Washington for audio production, and in there you learn how to mic and record out instruments and bands and stuff like that. And part of that course was going in and studying how drums are recorded in the past. And it was really interesting because one night the instructor was, he puts on John Bonham. He's like, okay, how do you think that was recorded? And we kind of listened to it, go, it was probably a big room or something like that. And he put on, some other bands, Neil Peart and stuff like that. And then he played Photograph. I think it was Photograph. He's like, how do you think that was recorded? And it was like, I don't know, because it's so freaking, it kicks you in the chest. And I remember this as a kid listening to on the radio. I was like, and he's like, this song changed the way that bands were recorded in the 80s. And he was an older gentleman, so he was able to talk to about how it was so influential, the drum sound. Now he's like, however, the reality is it's not a drum, that it's actually a synthesizer. And so what Mutt Lange did was he would record Rick Allen and then replace it with a synthesizer drum kick that was mic'd off of an amp. So
interesting.
Yeah. So that
still sounded real.
So it sounded real, but it was basically like the perfectly mic'd drum at the time. And it was something that you just were not able to do unless you actually did it artificially. And so when you listen to this album, now that you know that, you'll be like, wow, that definitely sounds like a drum machine. But at the time, it was so revolutionary. Nobody knew that. First of all, here's a metal band on the radio with a kick drum like that and snare and everything. And basically everything was replaced except for the cymbals or the crashes or something like that. So it's a very interesting album for that reason. When you were talking about sort of like what changed metal, sonically, this album changed metal for a lot of bands, for sure. They kind of like how the Dr. Feelgood album with Bob Rock going on to doing the Black Album with Metallica, people trying to chase those sort of drum sounds and those guitar sounds. This was one of those albums at the time, for sure.
So glad you brought that album up. You'll find out why later.
I think is that why everybody thought that Lars? No, everybody thought that Lars was a good drummer for a while. Is that? Like, yeah. Anyway. Okay,
see, when I hear this album, I look back on all the '80s tropey music videos where they've got the hexagon drum pads, and I mean, even Rick Allen did it at one point, and I just thought that was the decision somebody made, because we started with this and eventually we get to Pull Me Under, Mike Portnoy playing every single drum on that kit except for the snare drum, apparently. So
I don't want to go back to Dream Theater.
What drove that choice?
We can go back to Dream Theater. I'm more than happy to.
It has to be just a decision to save money, because look at how we record today. Now you can do everything at home, and if you want, you can record an entire drum set that sounds more real than what you may have the budget to produce. So
you think that they were doing those pads and stuff like that because you think it was cheaper? Because Roland drum kits back in the day were really expensive.
Yeah.
So, extremely expensive. And so I think it was just, my guess would be, of course, I wasn't old enough to know, but I think it's just one of those things where people chase what sounds good at the time. They'll go, wow, how did that band do that? Or what's that sound? For me, when I think of those sort of drum sounds, Alex Van Halen had a similar style where he had, toms that just sounded like nobody else at the time. Plus he used a lot of triggered drum samples as well. And it could be part of their sound, but also I think a lot of other bands want to do it too. But I also think too that, you also have the opposite effect where people are like, hey, like Rick Allen on this album and the next one is very famously complained because he was like, why the hell am I even in the studio if you're just going to replace me? And I think he's got a point. You know what I mean? It's like, it would be a very different album, this one, especially the next one, if an acoustic kit was played. So in the next album, that would have been impossible. However, that brings up a point here. So, they started using synthesized drums on this album, which actually worked out in their favor when Rick Allen loses an arm. And suddenly the technology is there for them to do an electronic kit where he can play with just, 3 appendages, which is pretty amazing, actually, how that worked out.
And I love the story of that, no matter how embellished it may be for those of us that didn't live it. But if you look at that band and you say, through everything, they just stuck together.
Yeah. Most bands probably would have just replaced their drummer. You know what I mean? And it's to Def Leppard's credit, I think, big time that they didn't do that. That they let him figure it out. I mean, it's amazing. I love the story of that. It's
most drummers would have said, "I can't do it."
Yeah, it's the most wholesome story in rock and roll. It really is. Like, in the sense of like, if you want to work at this, we're going to give you the time to work at it. And that's one thing that we're talking about, these records that came out in relatively rapid succession, but as time goes on, Def Leppard's going to be like, they're going to put a record out when they're ready, and I think it's to their benefit in most cases. There's a couple of things we're going to get to later that I'm going to have a lot of trouble defending. But at the same time, like, this is whenever they were like, with Pyromania, this is kind of like the world's introduction to Def Leppard, in the sense that, like, this is when they were getting the most radio play. This is when they were kind of, I don't want to say it's their peak because we haven't gotten to Hysteria yet, but like, I think that, like, really this was most people's introduction to Def Leppard, or at least anybody that was really into hard rock. I think that after Hysteria came out, you didn't have a choice whether you were into hard rock or not. But for the guys that were hard rockers and just into stuff that was into stuff that was heavy for the time, and a band that cared a lot about good, like, guitar, like lead guitar work. I think that's something that this band does really, really well, that I think a lot of people don't give them credit for. Everybody remembers the hooks, but people don't remember the solos. And I think the solos are actually much better than what the band is giving credit for.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Phil Collins is an amazing, lead guitarist as well, for sure. And I think the thing with me and Pyromania is that I love the cover. I think this cover is iconic and epic and looks fantastic on a t-shirt. And it has some of the best Def Leppard songs. But it also has some filler too. And that's what's kind of interesting about this album is that I don't love it from front to back, but I do love definitely many of the songs on here. All the ones that people know. I mean, Photograph, Rock of Ages, Foolin' is great, but I also really love Die Hard the Hunter and also Billy's Got a Gun. I think those two songs are awesome.
100%. So, you put out a record like Pyromania. How do you follow that up? I mean, it's one of those records that, everybody loves, at least everybody that's into hard rock loves. And how do you respond to that? Well, you put out a record called Hysteria.
Are you getting it, Dan? Are you getting it?
Oh, I'm getting
it.
Yes. I'm getting it. Dan.
Yes.
I'm getting it. It's this record, man. I mean, what does 199,707,317 Spotify streams mean to you? I think all of us as content creators would love to have that level of numbers on anything. This record obviously spawned one of the greatest mega hits in rock music back then. Today, I know that it's summertime, it's hot outside. If I go to a pool party with a pool party with a boombox and I play this song, everybody's going to be my best friend. So and of course I'm talking about Pour Some Sugar on Me.
Let's go back to you with the boombox.
Okay, first of all, I wouldn't be at a pool party, but if I was, I would have a boombox with Hysteria in it.
It only plays cassettes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a Hysteria cassette. That's fine. So that's okay. This record is, I'm of two minds about this record. On one mind, I'm like, holy crap. Like, you guys blew it out of the water. You guys went from being just a rock band, just another rock band, a rock metal band. And now you're one of, if not the biggest band in the world that year, because you've stripped your sound down. It's not as complex as it was before, but it's all about the hooks. You've strained out all of the other elements of your sound, and you've made yourself into a band that literally just produces hooks over and over and over and over again. And on one mind, it's like, congratulations. I've said this a million times on this podcast. I cannot wait for my day to sell out. Because I got a wife and kids and a house, and I'd love to sell out anytime. Let's do it.
It's like that song from Tool, right? Which Hooker with a Penis?
Yes.
Like, I sold out long before you.
Mm-hmm. I'm not like some member of the hard rock ethos cult or anything. Like, if a band wants to put out a record like Hysteria and absolutely blow everyone else out of the water, that's what you should do. There is no other choice to make. And they absolutely did this on this record. But on the other side of it, the punk rock side of me is like, come on, guys. Like, you guys were a hard rock band. You guys stuck with that. This record is not as musically interesting as some of your previous records. What are you guys doing? Blah, blah, blah. You guys have all heard me make this speech before. You can go back and listen to the In Flames episode. It's a whole thing. But like, at the same time, at my current age, I give into the more positive side of it. I think this was the smartest thing that they possibly could have done. Everything sounds super loud. The drums, especially even the drums on Pour Some Sugar on Me, are like the loudest drums. I don't care if they're fake or they're sampled or whatever the deal is. They are some of the loudest drums you're ever going to hear. And if you go and see this band play this song live, okay, the drums are going to be that loud, if not louder. It's gonna blow your mind. Everybody, this is not the song that comes on and you go and get a beer. This is absolutely anything that they play off of this record is going to be absolutely a hit. Everybody's going to go nuts. Everybody's going to go crazy. And even if it's not my personal cup of tea, it's not something that I'm just going to put on. This is kind of that album that I go to whenever, I'm driving in the car and somebody says, "Can you put on something that everyone can enjoy?" This is what I put on, and I'm not disappointed with it. I think Hysteria is one of the best examples of what you can do. I would say in a lot of ways this is their Black album, in that they This is where they became a band that everybody became aware of immediately.
Well, their goal with this, if you read the, I know there's a couple versions of this album that has liner notes and sort of the story of it. And the story of it is that Mutt Lange, his goal was to make an album like Thriller from Michael Jackson, which was, at the time, Michael Jackson had 6 hits off of Thriller, which at the time was just mind-blowing. You've got 1, 2, or 3 hits off an album, that was considered a very successful album. And so he believed that with Def Leppard and Hysteria, that he could make a greatest hits album out of a single release. And so that was their goal with this. And they got pretty damn close.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they had six singles released in the UK and 7 in the United States before they finally just gave up. They actually wanted to put out another single, and the band was like, "We're ready to move on. We're tired. We've been touring for 2 years. We want to do something else."
When I started to pay more attention to the music I was listening to and not the songs that I was hearing, I was fascinated by how many of the Def Leppard classics just come from Hysteria.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
For me, it's that point in the career where metal was getting ready to change if it hadn't already started. But everybody let Def Leppard have it because it was their thing. You want to blame them for the bad things that happened with hair metal? I don't care. You can't write this many good songs and be expected to be more raw, be less pleasant to listen to. What had they gone through in the past 5 years? Rick Allen lost his fucking arm, and you get Hysteria.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it's impressive for sure. I mean, again, looking back on that, it's just a testament to the band for sure. I love the fact that they worked that out, and that the technology was available for him to do that. He was just, that happened at a time when you could do drum pedals and triggers like that to have a drummer with only one arm pull it off. And he continues. And actually now Rick Allen plays an acoustic set as well. So he's an amazing guy for that reason, for sure. The thing about when I look back to this album, a couple things stick out in my mind. For one, they made the choice in North America to release Women as the very first single for this. And the reason why that they did that is because they didn't do that anywhere else in the world, only in North America. And the reason why they did that here is because the record label felt that Women was the heavier song and therefore would appeal to the fans of their metal side. And I will tell you, as a kid who was a fan of Def Leppard, when I heard that song, I didn't really like it. And I still think it's kind of one of the weaker songs on the album. I think it's just an okay tune. It's a roadblock to getting to the real classics on this album, which are, as we mentioned here, it's like Animal, Rocket, Pour Some Sugar on Me, all these other songs. And so it's kind of
bites.
Okay. I don't really like Love Bites. I think it's a really well crafted song. But honestly, actually, to be quite honest, I don't really like the ballads that Def Leppard writes. I think they're
really,
they're so good though.
You're gonna have a bad time.
So good
coming up.
I know, and absolutely. And the truth is, actually, I don't really like ballads that much at all. I mean, there's very few ballads I actually really like, and Love Bites is a song I never liked it when it first came out. I still don't like. It's the only song I will skip on this album every single time because I'm just like, my wife likes it. That's fine, whatever. But
we found the breaking point of Metal Jesus.
and that's pretty consistent across all this. As you mentioned, they go pretty deep on ballads in upcoming albums for sure. But anyway, so when this came out, I was disappointed as a kid. I was like, God, Women's weak. And then what's this other stuff on here? This is really overly produced, and it's kind of, it just didn't sound like Pyromania at all. But what happened is that I didn't hate it. And so I kept playing the album over and over. I played this album every single day for probably a year. So much so that my best friend was like, Jesus, would you just play something different? He was so sick of coming over and hearing this album at the time, because ultimately I did love the album, and it turned into one of my favorites. I mean, for me, it's my favorite Def Leppard album by far. I can still put it on today I still love it. It sounds incredible. Like I have a really nice stereo in my car. Man, it fucking destroys the stereo system in my car. It's awesome sounding,
Yes.
Plus I also like, some of the other B-side songs on here, like Run Right is a really cool song. It's a little bit faster. God of War, is that what it's called? Or I should
Gods of War, I think.
Gods of War, thank you. Where it's got the sample of Ronald Reagan in there and stuff like that. I dig that stuff a lot for sure.
I can't tell you how many albums I have that like I ended up loving them because of purchase justification, which is what I think is kind of what you dealt with this record too. Is like you buy it, you don't necessarily dig it the first time that you listen to it, but you continue listening to it anyway because that's the record that you bought.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you could have picked any record in the world, but you bought this one, and so you kind of keep listening to it, and it's probably the time in your life that you're going to be the most open-minded about music that you've ever been, because it's like, well, I bought this, I own it now. This is the new release that I have, and I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I didn't really get to buy that many albums in a quick succession. So, you just kind of stuck with what you had. And this record is 100% a grower because the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, God, what is this sellout stuff? It's back when I was listening to like Exodus and Slayer and stuff like that. So like I didn't have a whole lot of tolerance for something like Def Leppard, but when you're walking down the street or you're, biking over to your friend's house or something and you're listening and you start kind of singing these songs to yourself and because they've wormed their way into your brain in a way that maybe a heavier band can't. I love heavy bands. I love death metal bands and thrash metal bands, but sometimes those bands are interchangeable with each other, and with stuff like Def Leppard, it's like every song is kind of its own thing. They're almost kind of a hard band to listen to a full record of because every song is kind of its own thing. They don't necessarily follow the theme of or they don't follow a theme really at all. Every song kind of has its own vibe, and that's the most apparent on Hysteria.
There is two things I want to mention about this album, though, as far as collectors and fans go. And so before we move on, for sure. So I actually have 3 copies of Hysteria on vinyl. And the reason...
Oh, wow.
The reason for that is because the original releases of Hysteria is actually a really long album, and so long that the original pressing of it actually is pretty poor when it gets to the inner groove. Yeah, I don't know how much you guys know about vinyl, but the closer that you get to the center ring, the lower the quality of the audio is. And, and so Hysteria is one of those albums where it is actually pretty shitty sounding. Those last couple songs on each side because they're running out of room. So anyway, they finally a couple years ago released the double vinyl versions of it on 180 gram vinyl. So that's what I have right here.
It's about fucking time.
It really was. A lot of fans like me were like, okay, guys, let's do this. I think it took vinyl coming back for them to kind of go, oh, maybe people actually do care. The other thing I want to mention too, really quick, is that Def Leppard did a residency in Vegas, and where they basically for, I think, a week or 10 days or something like that, played Hysteria in its entirety.
Oh, wow.
In Vegas. That's kind of cool in of itself. However, it's not the best part. The best part is that they were their own opening band. So
what?
So yes. So they basically on this DVD and Blu-ray, you can't really see it, but they basically play as their own opening band called Dead Flatbird. And the reason why they did that is because they wanted to play all the songs they never get to play. And so what they did is they came out, they didn't tell the audience that they were doing this. A lot of people were kind of like, what the hell's going on here? No pyro, no anything behind them. And they basically would play all the songs that you never hear them play, like Wasted, like all the songs off of On Through the Night and High and Dry, and plus also some of the B-sides that they later did. And they did it in character of a band that's pretending to be a Def Leppard cover band.
That's amazing.
That is so cool.
It is so cool. I mean, it's the only it's the Hysteria live stuff on this is fine. It's great, as you would expect. But the Dead Flatbird stuff and their set list is every Def Leppard dream set list. It's awesome to watch. They did 2 of them. So yeah, definitely check that out.
I'll have to track that down. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't have
other bands that do
DVDs. I need to get more. The only one I have, I think, is like I've got a couple, but I think the only one that I really watch anymore is like the Death live and raw, like Death and Raw in LA. And that thing is so old. Like I need to check out like a live DVD that has like really good production. You know,
what you should do is what I do is whenever I go to, we have half price books up here in Seattle, which is like like a used, but anyways, and they always have like a live music DVD Blu-ray section, and I buy them there. I just go through and I just pick up all the rock and metal stuff because they're getting collectible and expensive, because a lot of the stuff is not on streaming. You can't get it anywhere else. And even though it's on DVD sometimes, and so the video is kind of low quality, the audio is almost always excellent on those.
It's in like 5.1. Yeah.
Yes. Or they'll have like an actually uncompressed version of the audio. And so actually a lot of the live and music video stuff that you see on DVD is actually going up in price because you can't watch it anywhere else.
Right, not in that quality. You can watch on YouTube. It's going to be terrible. Yeah,
if it even lasts, if they don't give a copyright claim, right?
Well, right, yeah. That's always the Reaper lurking behind anybody. Well, speaking of the Reaper, no, I'm kidding. But whenever we move on to Adrenaline, so like, keep in mind, Adrenaline comes out.
It's Adrenalize. 1992.
Adrenalize.
I'm flashing back to the Deftones episode. Adrenalize is, it came out a solid, 5 years after Hysteria.
I don't have this one vinyl. I can't show it. Sorry.
That's all right. I got you covered. So Adrenalize, number one, like anybody that expected this to be a Hysteria, I mean,
It's Hysteria Part 2. It is what they kind of tried to do the Hysteria Part 2 thing, I think, here.
I think that they largely failed.
Yes, I would agree.
But yeah, this is one of those hard things where, they have a song called White Lightning, which I think is like, you guys are trying to catch lightning in a bottle, which is what they did with Hysteria.
Actually, I think White Lightning is a tribute to the late Steve Clark. I believe that song is a dedication to him.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very emotional song, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think it might have riffs or something like that he wrote before he died.
I will say that Let's Get Rocked is a great opener.
And
it's what you would expect, I think, from a follow-up to Hysteria. The problem I have with it is just that, like, and it's not even that I have a problem with it, but this record's kind of a victim to times changing. The musical landscape, unfortunately, was very different in 1992 than it was in 1987, right? Yeah. And you've got Def Leppard here doing what Def Leppard does very well. I mean, it's not that this is a bad. I don't think any of their records are bad. I'll say it like straight out. I don't think that they like. I don't think that they ever.
Wait till we get to the next one, then we'll have a discussion about that.
Fair enough. But I don't think that they ever like sucked. Like it was a point where I was like, oh my god, why would I even listen to this band? And again, this is all from a 2020 perspective. Do you think I listened to any of these later day Def Leppard albums? If not for the show, like it's one of those like, like I'm hearing these for the first time in 2021. So my perspective is a little bit skewed on that.
You missed out on the Sparkle Lounge, my friend.
I didn't miss out. I listened to it. I listened to all of them, but like, this is definitely a step down, even though they were trying. I could see that they were trying to capture kind of that same glory that they'd had with Hysteria. But I think the problem is that when you get to 1992 and all the buzz has faded from Hysteria, who's left? Who's left that's listening to Def Leppard? There are people.
So I will say that, this was an album that was probably designed for me. I was a massive Def Leppard fan. However, again, I mentioned I was living in Seattle in 1992. This was not what I was interested in at all.
Sure.
I was, I kicked in the nuts like everybody else with, Soundgarden and Nirvana and Alice in Chains and all that sort of stuff was, coming up and taking over. And this album at the time, I didn't hate it. Like you mentioned, Let's Get Rocked, and it had some decent songs in here. Heaven is decent. Tonight, White Lightning. But it just, you could tell they're trying to capture that Hysteria in a bottle. And you're right. It's like, it's not there. Maybe if the songs were a little better, I don't know if this album had Mutt Lange on it, but part of me thinks he wasn't part of this album because he is a perfectionist. And I suspect that he probably would not have let this go out the door. I could be wrong though. I'd have to look at that.
It was Mike Shipley is the producer on this one.
Okay.
And it was, I guess, partially produced by Def Leppard. And yeah, I think the problem is it's just not cool anymore in 1992. I think that's one of the biggest things, and that's hard, and that's why I had a slightly different perspective of it. It's a lot higher on the list than I think it would be for most people that went through it, when it was released, because I was like, well, this really isn't like that off base for Def Leppard. It's not as good as the last record, but like, what is? It's one of the most successful records ever released. Nobody can really reproduce that. Load's not as good as the Black Album. You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things. But like,
from a popular music standpoint, this almost sounds like one of the leftovers from the 80s. Yeah. Like, the industry knew that we were changing as consumers and music fans, but who are your big names that you're not going to mess with? And Def Leppard is one of those names. Right. I don't want Def Leppard to put out Risk in 1992. I want them to do what Def Leppard does. And for those people that only want that, hey guys, look over here. Remember the 80s? Remember how cool it was? It's still here. You can still buy it, and that'll be $22.99.
And I, again, looking back on this album now, I like it more than I did when it came out. Again, when it came out, I listened to it and bought it, and it's like, and then kind of just moved on. And that was kind of a lot of the 90s, really, with hair metal for me and a lot of people, is that these bands were trying to put out stuff, and you're right. It's just that in very few cases did you have an album that had that 80s aesthetic and still connect with the audience. It would take another couple decades for sure for that stuff to kind of roll back around.
Yeah, people just didn't care, and I think that's one of the hardest. I mean, obviously somebody did care. Like, I love talking about my Spotify stats. For some reason that is important to me. But I mean, some of these songs still have like 13 million, 4 million, 2 million streams. So like, there are plenty of diehard Def Leppard fans out there. But I think that like in 1992, this is just not going to hit the right way. People are not going to be into it. You've got grunge kind of starting, and you've got just all of the alternative rock bands that came out. Everybody was tired of the excess of the 80s. And that's why, everybody says like, oh, Nirvana killed metal, which is a bullshit statement that isn't actually true, but maybe in the mainstream it's true. But Def Leppard is a band that was firmly rooted in the mainstream. So they're going to show up with these hysteria-esque songs 5 years later, and people are going to be like, what else you guys got? The diehard fans, though, like when they're looking back on this album, there is a little bit more rose-tinted glasses in that, like, it is kind of admirable that they kind of stuck with their sound despite what the trends were. And trust me, as we go further in the discography, you're going to really wish that they had done that for everything, because after a while, it might be annoying that your band sticks with a very familiar sound. But after a few records and you go through a decade where this kind of music's not acceptable, it becomes endearing. And they're going to get there again. But like, as we move on, this conversation is going to accelerate a little bit because I don't have a lot to say about each individual one. And I think most Def Leppard fans feel that way, is that like, there's going to be moments coming up where we're going to be like, what were you guys thinking?
Yeah.
So, 1996.
Yeah. Okay. Let's
Slang.
Joe's just ripping the scab off. Well, you don't have this one on vinyl?
No, I don't. And, no, I don't. And I think this is the only Def Leppard album I don't own, because so you're showing Euphoria here, but it should be Slang.
Yeah, I realize that. Yeah.
He really doesn't want to talk about this album.
He's not even showing the right album. Yeah.
A little too late.
I heard you say Slang, but you really meant Euphoria, right?
Yeah, we're going to really skip
fine.
ahead.
We'll talk about Slang. There you go.
Slang, I'll be honest, and I'm sorry if this upsets people, but I hate this album. And I listened to it back in the day, didn't like it at all. Listened to it a couple times this week to just make sure that I was, solid in my my convictions, and they're 100% right there. This happened a lot in the mid 90s where bands were like, we got to do something different. We got to do something new. And, and this is the result of that. This sounds like a band that is lost. It sounds like a band that just needs like some espresso or do a line of Coke, man. It's like, it's so boring.
The 90s had this weird relationship with mid-range equalizers, electronics, and Europop, where we all just tried to create this dark, dingy sounding industrial music. Trent Reznor did it, guys. I get it.
Yeah.
I would have tried to do it too, but I don't think we needed Def Leppard to do it. In hindsight, though, it's kind of cool to look back and say, wow, you guys tried that weird 90s loop thing with electronics, and you're Def Leppard still, right? Okay, cool. Can we move on now?
I think they even had like a sitar in there and some other stuff and some chanting. It's like, wow, okay. They tried it.
With Adrenalize, they were like, yeah, we're Def Leppard and we're sticking to it. Slang is like, you know, like a 60-year-old man walks out in front of your high school gymnasium. You guys are all there for an assembly or something. And he walks out and he's wearing like a tie-dyed t-shirt and like blue jeans or something. And he's like, how's it going, fellow youths? You know, I understand what it's like when your parents just don't get it, you know,
wasting away in Margaritaville.
Yeah, it's just, it's that. That's all I hear with slang is this idea of like, you know, we stuck to our guns on the last record. It didn't do that very well. So we need to figure out what it is people like. Maybe this is them. Maybe this is the record label. I don't know. There's an entire, on Spotify, you can listen to an entire commentary on this record where they, I guess, try to explain it. I didn't listen to it because I just...
Wait, Def Leppard is trying to explain it?
I actually don't know because I didn't listen to it. But it was one of those things where, you know, they released a deluxe edition of this. It's like 2 hours long with like all these B-sides and stuff. But what I think is interesting is some of the B-sides are actually kind of good. And that this is kind of what they landed on. And so it's one of those things where it sounds like a band kind of at war with themselves, where they're like, okay, we want to do something that's going to appeal to a larger amount of people. And we did that with Hysteria and it worked really, really well. But now we can't use our same bag of tricks. You know, every band has a bag of tricks that they just pull them out every now and again. And Def Leppard definitely had that, but now they've got to learn new tricks and it just doesn't work. The weird kind of almost attitude to some of the vocals and some of the instrumentation is just kind of laughable nowadays. And I find it hard to believe that it wasn't laughable then. I think it probably was. I don't think anybody's listening to Def Leppard in 1996. I mean, maybe people are, you know, obviously there's still millions of streams on some of the songs, but so I got hats off to the amount of diehards that these guys have. But like, this has to be rough. I mean, even if you're a diehard Def Leppard fan, I can't imagine you listening to this and being like, yeah, more please.
Supposedly they do have the fans of this album. They've said that and I tend to believe that. I think that it depends on kind of when you come in on a band that maybe you connect with them. And so maybe in the 90s, some young kid, 8 years old, found this album and thought it was pretty cool and interesting. And, you know, it reminds me very much of Kiss. Kiss very famously did something very similar to this back in 1980 or something like that. They tried to do a prog concept album called The Elder.
Oh boy.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but
I'm not.
You know,
no.
Kiss, you know, saw it was trying to change some stuff. And so they did a progressive rock concept album that is generally considered horrible. You know, and they got the guy who helped make The Wall and all that stuff and to record it. But anyways, that album was a bomb at the time. And even now fans are like, you know, with a little bit of hindsight and a little bit of other stuff around there to enjoy, people are like, yeah, The Elder, kind of weird, but it's interesting. It's, you know what I mean? And so I think that a lot of people with Def Leppard kind of come back to slang and go, it's, you know, maybe not their finest hour, but maybe there are some nuggets in there. I know for me personally, the only song I can even listen to on here without, you know, horking my guts out is Slang. I think Slang is is actually up tempo kind of fun tune. And so that's the one song I like, but
see, Turn It Out is pretty good too. I'm getting like a David Bowie in the 90s vibe. Like the band should have just dressed differently and given themselves short amber orange hair and made everything as dark as possible, hired a guy to sit in back to be their DJ and just play Slang. Like, you could have gone to see that Def Leppard and it would have been hilarious.
No, they would have played 2 songs off of Slang and then played all the hits that you were there to hear. You
Absolutely.
know? Like that's, I mean, that's the only smart thing to do at this point.
It's weird, but I don't hate it. And it's hard that's hindsight.
It's hard to try to be cool. Like I get that, you know, I lived it. I still live it. It's hard to try to be cooler than you are or to be different than what you are. And as a music critic, I would say that like it's admirable that they did try to do something different.
Well, the 90s was the time to do that, right? Because they could just make an alternative style rock album, which I think this is what I would call this. And, you know, and a lot of bands tried that and didn't. I mean, most bands who are from the 80s tried doing something like this and didn't work out. And they basically just had to kind of hibernate for another 10 years and then do reunion tours.
I mean, who was the only old school band that did well in the 90s? Is Aerosmith the only one? And, you know, Metallica, Bon Jovi. Yeah. Bon
Jovi did really well. And I don't understand it because I'm an old school Bon Jovi fan. I love Slippery When Wet and Fahrenheit 7800 and all those early stuff. And I don't, you know, I think it was Blaze of Glory got him through it and It's My Life. And you know what I mean? But somehow they pulled it out. Also, too, I think, and I don't know how true this is, but I know it is true now that, you know, we're in America, right? We're in North America and our music, you know, industry here is much different than the rest of the world. And so it's very possible that some of these bands just go tour Europe and South America for a decade. You know what I mean? Where maybe they are still played on the radio or, you know, accepted, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the best example out of that, and it's kind of out of left field, is Limp Bizkit, who, you know, everybody just decided around 2002 that Limp Bizkit was not worth their time. And then Limp Bizkit just went overseas where they were very worth everyone's time, you know, and it's only now recently, I think I read an article on Metal Injection before we started recording where they were actually showing live footage of Limp Bizkit playing live here in the US, and they have a summer tour planned and stuff. So like it's all cyclical, you know?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that too, how this type of music, you know, eventually, it had a bad run in the 90s, but now this is the kind of stuff that people will pay top dollars.
Oh yeah. I mean, we went and saw them. We saw Def Leppard and Poison. I'm trying to remember. It must have been like mid 2000s. And I don't know, we paid, you know, too much.
Sure. Yeah, of course you did. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was awesome. You know, they acted like they wanted to be there, and honestly, Poison destroyed them. The Poison's awesome in concert. And that was, and, you know, it was great, but you know, they weren't playing the State Fair. Let's put it that way. They were playing a real Coliseum tour, and it was sold out and packed full of people like me who were kind of like, yeah, I'm into this. Let's do it. You know?
Right. Well, unfortunately, gentlemen, we are still in the dark ages.
You're not liking Euphoria, really?
I don't lie. Okay. Let's just throw it out there. Okay. So Euphoria is, and I couldn't get a high quality photo of it for some reason.
Let's talk about the cover for a second.
What cover?
Did Joe Elliott just get his like 10-year-old nephew and his brand new copy of Photoshop to make that? It's horrible.
It's not great.
Hey Dan, I've got a spirograph.
Yeah, I've got this lens flare thing. I'm just going to duplicate it about 4 times, and we're going to put the title. It's terrible. I hate that cover.
I mean, it has the classic Def Leppard logo on it.
Yeah, and that's about it.
I didn't have that. But
that's true.
This album sounds like the mistake they didn't make in 1992.
Yep.
This is better than Slang. Okay, I'll give it that.
This has better songs for sure. Actually, to be fair, this actually has one of my favorite songs of Def Leppard. It's Promises. I think that is a fantastic Def Leppard song. It could have came out back in the 80s. It would have been a mega hit for sure. But also it's important to know that this song, or this album and that song specifically, was partially written by Mutt Lange. Okay. He's the hit maker. He's the guy. I don't know if you know his history, but he's a guy who, after Def Leppard, in between this, the reason why he wasn't working with Def Leppard because he's working with Shania Twain, and he basically rocketed her to international stardom. So he knows how to record, how to write a song, and so he came back for a couple of tracks of this. And I think he was the executive producer. He ultimately signed off on it. So that's kind of why Def Leppard at this point is a little bit back to what they do best, you know?
I would wonder what their comfort level was in playing the songs off of Slang. and trying to mix those with the classic hits, because that's got to be a really, really hard line to toe. Of like, yeah, here's this like newer, more modern stuff. If they're going to even give it that much credit. And then here's all the songs that you guys actually came to see, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think with a record like, with a record like Euphoria, you're more, it's a much safer record, in the sense that like, yeah, they're not going to rock our world on this one, but they're going to give us the Def Leppard experience that we wanted.
And I would say, I think it's their strongest. Well, let's put it this way. Looking at what we have left to talk about, I mean, this is the last original Def Leppard album that I really like. For me personally, I like Demolition Man. I love Promises. Back in Your Face is cheesy, but I dig it. Paper Sun is cool and heavy. That's a great song. 21st Century Sha La La Girl is fun. Not great, but fun. I think Disintegrate is the instrumental song on here, which again was cool. Def Leppard was doing an instrumental song again, which I really dig.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a perfect album by any means, but I felt like, okay, well, I'm not going to completely write them off at this point. They can still do it, you know?
Is this more of a classic Def Leppard record than Adrenalize would be in 1992?
You know, I think if you... to answer your question, I would say it'd be awesome if they could combine the two.
Side A, side B.
There you go.
Yeah, take the best of both of those. Because, you know, one thing I've noticed too with Def Leppard, their albums start getting a little long. Like, I don't know you know what I mean? Like, I kind of feel like this is a band that, again, that he needs a producer to knock it down to 10 kick-ass songs, not 14 with the filler, you know what I mean? And so to answer your question, it would be really awesome to take Adrenalize and Euphoria and mix those together. I think you would have an album that would be close to Hysteria for sure.
I think I'm going to need Metal Jesus to make a playlist for this episode, Dan. What do you think?
Maybe. This is how you need to listen to these records. Yeah. I think that like, yeah, I mean, cut out a lot of the filler, because I think that's my biggest issue with Euphoria is that it has a lot of filler. It has a lot of like, it being 51 minutes long. This is when I started kind of reaching exhaustion, because like, so where I work, I work on ventilators, like oxygen ventilators and stuff like that, and how that ties into having a problem with filler is that like when you're testing on an oxygen machine, you have to sit there and watch it for like 20 minutes and watch this like O2 meter to tell you if it's like producing oxygen the way it's supposed to be producing it. And that could take sometimes up to 20-25 minutes. So like I'm listening to this Def Leppard record and I'm staring at this screen, and then when I get two ballads in a row, I'm like, somebody's tapping me on the shoulder. Hey, you're awake? Like, what's going on right now?
You know, get up and do some jumping jacks there, man.
It's funny, actually, because my headphones, I couldn't find them one day last week. And so I brought a portable speaker in with me, and I was like, oh, I'm listening to Def Leppard. Nobody's going to be upset, you know, that I'm listening to this. And so I pop it in, and it was the same day that I had shaved. And so when I came in and I'm like sitting there at my desk working, listening to Def Leppard, and one of my coworkers is like, are you really you? Like, because your beard's gone? And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm listening to hard rock. And he's like, yeah, but like, the stuff that you usually listen to when you're working like scares everyone.
This
like,
is not the real Discuss Metal, Dan. This is false, Dan.
This is hard rock. Yeah, this is Discuss Rock, Dan.
You know, like, little do they know you just got neutered that morning. It's like, wow, it's so, you know,
that explains all the blood.
They had no idea. Yeah, like,
all your testosterone's gone. It's like you just get everyone hugs. Come here.
I'm not even man enough to be this guy's woman. But I think that like. Yeah, Euphoria is just it. Okay, let's be positive for a second. It's a step in the step in the right direction. It's the direction that they needed to go in. If you can't beat them, don't join them. Just keep doing the same thing that you're doing, and hope that people that are diehard fans are gonna get behind it. And I think largely they did, and I think that the fans were there for it. And this is where it's like, oh yeah, I can buy a Def Leppard record now and not have to worry about them doing anything weird.
Yeah, I definitely felt that way. I was like, okay, again, it's not, you know, they haven't created the masterpiece, you know, but there are 5 good songs on here that I still listen to today and I don't hate. I actually like them quite a bit, and they show up on they've got a couple greatest hits albums, and not surprisingly, my favorite is Volume 2. It includes Volume 2 has a bunch of these type of songs on there that you're not sick of hearing, you know, and you kind of get to discover mixed up in the other stuff. It's pretty cool.
100%. Are we ready for X?
We are.
2002.
Another album I don't own. Man, you know, I
feel about the cover of this one.
Yeah, well, at least it doesn't. It's a step barely above Euphoria.
Right.
Yeah. It looks like it would be a rockin' album, but it's the opposite of that.
It's contemporary top 40 Def Leppard.
Yeah.
Like when I look at a band like this, like in comparison to some of the other music I listen to, it's like so laughably poppy. And then you listen to a record like this and you're like, oh wow, okay, that was not as far down as the rabbit hole goes. Like these guys, like you might hear some of these songs at the dentist office, you know, but I don't hate it for whatever reason. I found this one to be kind of enjoyable. And I didn't fall asleep while I was listening to it. It's a very like melodic kind of emotional album from Def Leppard. Whereas like I'm used to these guys, for lack of a better way to describe it, I'm used to these guys being fake cool all the time and not necessarily being like 100% honest about their feelings. and this record is all of that. It's like the men behind the music sort of experience. And I actually kind of responded to that really well. It's a little long, but you know, I think if you stop maybe around like track 10, you'll probably be good, you know, because this thing coming in at 56 minutes, it's a little bit of a chore to listen to, but you know, if you take it in small doses, it's not bad. Yeah, this is definitely an album that I think that could have been trimmed down to 10 great songs or decent songs. You know, it's funny that I don't really like this album very much at all, but I get it though. You know, as far as you're right, it's a really well constructed album for sure. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of curious, you know, when you go on Amazon, you start reading reviews, and you know, I was surprised how many people love this album. Like, yeah, and I think it is one of those albums where if you just listen to it a couple times, it may actually grow on you. And so it's, you know, it's an album that actually, again, kind of like you, I listened to and I was like, I don't really hate this album that much. Kind of like you said, like I think the first couple 4 or 5 tracks, they're okay, you know. Yeah, they're not my favorite type of Def Leppard. There's not a lot of heavy riffs in here, but you know,
As a fan of Rick Allen's drumming, this is the first time he just got better samples. I wish there was a nicer way to say it, but yeah, if it was any doubt in your mind that dude could play drums, this is where you can forget what you're hearing is someone who's not playing normal drum set. Yeah. And it all kind of fits together.
He might be playing an acoustic set on here sometimes. I know that now he does that more. I'm not sure how he does it. I mean, it must be how it's laid out or something like that, but who knows? Maybe this might just be a bunch of, you know, real drums. It's kind of cool.
But for an album that looks so, pardon the pun, extreme, as simple as it is, this is a laid back Def Leppard. I dig it because it's not embracing 2002, trying to do something different. It's almost like they looked at their peers. You mentioned Bon Jovi earlier, and they kind of did something similar where they just laid back and did the same thing they were already doing.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's not going to win any awards as like a great metal record or a great rock record necessarily, but like I said, I kind of appreciate that whole, like, let's try to go a little bit out of the norm. But they also didn't really abandon their sound. They just kind of focused on a specific aspect of their sound that they hadn't really expanded out into a full record before.
Right.
And so you get stuff that's a little bit slower. It's a little bit more emotional. And as a hard rock fan, I'm not going to love it. I have to be in a certain mood to listen to it. But for the most part, I think that they did fine. I mean, you know, it's terrible to say. And that's what I mean by I don't think the records necessarily suck. Slang kind of sucks, but this one, but yeah, but I mean, yeah, with X, it's just one of those records that I could take it or leave it. It's not that it's going to change my life or anything, but it's good to see Def Leppard still doing the damn thing this many years into their career, when they absolutely could have stopped releasing albums in the mid 90s, and they could have just toured off of their hits.
So for their next album, are you going to the cover album?
Do I have to?
I like this album more than I expected to. Are we doing it?
If Metal Jesus wants to talk about, then we're talking about,
All right. Well, I thought that you guys might bring this up, so I went ahead and still grabbed it. This is a hard one to judge because it's not their songs.
However, it's I'm just to be clear, I typically don't like cover albums, and the reason for that is because one, I usually can make the arguments like I just rather hear the original. You know what I mean? Or it's so out there that it's not something I'm interested in, or maybe sometimes the songs are just overplayed. And what I like about this album, it's 100% cover albums. It's all British or English songwriters.
Yeah.
And I'm not sick of all the songs on here. Actually, many of them I'd never heard of before. And so that was what's kind of cool about it. And also a lot of these, I think they make their own and do really interesting things with it. So, I love 20th Century Boy. I think we've actually played that as a band on stage. We'll do the Def Leppard version. Their version of Rock On, I think is killer. Hanging on the Telephone, I had no idea actually was not a Blondie song. It was actually written by a British band, and they were the ones doing the cover of it. I thought that's pretty cool.
Yes.
The ELO song in here, normally when you're going to do an ELO song, you would do one of the big hits, but they chose to do the overture, which I thought was really cool. Again, they covered David Bowie, but it's not the song you would normally think of. But the real standout song in this is the last one, Stay With Me.
Rod Stewart. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's The Faces, obviously sung by Rod Stewart, but that's Phil Collin on vocals, and he nails the Rod Stewart vocals on that, and the slide guitar on that is killer. So I actually really dig this album. Again, because I'm not sick of these songs, it's kind of cool to be introduced to stuff I'm not usually familiar with. So
cover albums for me work or they don't work. And for me, that's usually, do you play the song the way it's written, or do you over embellish it and try to turn it into something that it's not? I love listening to a band like Power Man 5000 do covers because they make it sound like Power Man 5000, but they don't change the song. For me, this is a very unique example of a covers album because you have a British band playing British songs. It's not just a album of covers that we decided to play this week because we had to meet the record release schedule. So for that, it is unique and it's cool.
It reminds me of Metallica and why I like their covers, because often their covers are pretty straight, but they're often better than the originals, or at least Metallica-ized, right? Like their version of Stone Cold Crazy.
Yes.
I love that,
Oh, it's a 10-to-1 better. Yeah.
Free speech for the dead.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. They've just got so many. I mean, speaking of Metallica, by the way, I'm sure you guys know that big Black Album cover album's coming out that is like anybody and everybody, country stars, rap stars, hip hop, metal, everyone is going to be doing it. Ghost is going to be in there. That's going to be weird.
Well, that makes sense.
That does make a lot of sense. I don't want to say I'm looking forward to it. I probably will like it. I've become kind of an old softy since we started doing this. I was much more of a metal purist whenever we first started, but I'm excited to hear some of those different interpretations of those songs.
Yeah, but it's going to be very hit and miss. I'm curious to hear it, but also too, it might be too much. Do we need 15 versions of Enter Sandman?
Of course we do. Of course we do. That's what the people want. Somebody decided that's what the people want. And I hate to say it, but people are sometimes dumb, and some people that's the only Metallica song that they know. So that's fine. I'm excited about it. I wasn't as excited about this one just because I'm going to be honest with you guys. I didn't know a lot of the songs that were on this one. So like if I didn't know it was a cover album going into it, I would have been like, okay, this is a weird album by Def Leppard. None of the songs sound like they go together or any of that. But yeah, it's actually interesting. So the version of it that I listened to actually had the Japanese bonus track or had the bonus tracks on it. And so it was actually really cool hearing them play Search and Destroy by the Stooges, which is something I was just not expecting at all. I just wouldn't have ever thought of like Def Leppard covering Iggy Pop, That was different, but
it's Iggy Pop, dude.
I think at this point in their career, they've earned it though. They've earned a cover record.
And don't you think it explains kind of their mentality? Because there's not a lot of metal or hard rock, heavy songs on here. It's a lot of glam rock, 70s. You know what I mean? So when I heard this, I was like, oh, this is really where they're coming from. This is why so many of their albums sound or go down these roads. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because these are their influences. It's not other stuff. It's not the hard rock, the metal. You know what I mean? There's no metal on here at all.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Well, there is a little bit. You've got "Don't Believe a Word" by Thin Lizzy.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Thin Lizzy. I consider her metal, but yeah, I think that it's not. It shows where they actually come from, and I think a lot of the times, especially with a band like Def Leppard, it's easy to just kind of categorize them as some band that had a big hit back in the day, and everybody liked them for that 5 minutes. Because I think for a lot of metal and hard rock fans, we put a lot of expectations on artists. We decide what we want them to sound like, and then we're disappointed when they don't do the thing that we want. Whereas I think this record provides a really good explanation, a good historical document of like, you have to understand where we're coming from,
Yeah.
in order to understand why we made the decisions that we made. It doesn't really explain away like slang, but it does explain a lot of their early stuff moving on. And then some of the stuff that people think is some of their most classic stuff wasn't necessarily the most like legitimate Def Leppard stuff. I think that's the interesting thing about Hysteria is it stands out as the band's most iconic album when it doesn't really necessarily sound like the band that put out all the rest of their records.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I think most people will make the argument that Mutt Lange, the producer, was the guy who really molded them in many ways, for sure. Because when he's not there, you can really tell.
Yeah. Yep. And then that's how we get, songs from the Sparkle Lounge.
Yeah.
2008. Go is so awesome. Come on.
You know what? It's so funny you mentioned that because I woke up the other day with that song in my head. You know how sometimes you just wake up with songs in your head? Mm-hmm. God, that song is catchy. I know.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, this is not another solid album, but it's got some great songs on it. The first 3 songs I think are great. Go, 9 Lives, and Come On, Come On are catchy as all hell,
Well, Go is interesting, and 9 Lives also is interesting in that, 9 Lives has almost kind of like this like country kind of sort of vibe to it. But Come On, Come On sounds like classic Def Leppard, in my opinion.
Or it sounds like something like a cover that they would have did on Like it's is that a Bowie song? What you know what I mean? It has that sort of that kind of hook to it.
But Go hits so hard right off the bat.
Yeah,
it's got that modern production. So this is the first time I can think of when I'm listening to Def Leppard and I hear actual guitar crunch. In a modern sort of way. And so I was really, really on board with that. I'm surprised that song's not more popular than it is, because this is the kind of thing that if they had released this as a single, I would have bought the record just off of that song alone. I'd have been like, no, these guys are I'd have been like, Def Leppard's back, boys. Let's get in there. This is going to be great. And then the rest of the record, they kind of do what they've been doing.
Yeah.
For the last couple of records. But I think it's fine. I mean, at this point, if you're a lifelong fan of a band like this, at this point, if they give you anything that sounds heavy or kind of out of the way, you're like, okay, cool. And you're more willing to accept kind of everything else that they do because they gave you the thing that you wanted. At least you still have those 1 or 2 songs that you're going to really, really latch onto. And the rest of the record, you can take it or leave it, but you're still going to rock these songs. These songs are going to still end up in your playlist. They're going to be the songs that you go to whenever you want to listen to Def Leppard. And, for a band this old, having a song from 2008 from this band in your playlist, I mean, that says a lot,
This is that weird time in all of our lives, recently post high school, where you're trying to learn or figure out how to be an adult. And I wasn't paying attention to Def Leppard. I was listening to a lot of music, but I didn't know this came out. And then sometime in 2009, 2010, my good friend Aaron Kusterer walks up to me and says, number 1, I'm going to South America because I get to play guitar for a living now. Second, I bought this new album by Def Leppard, and I said songs from the Sparkle Lounge. If that doesn't sound like a parody of 80s metal, I don't know what does.
Well, the cover almost looks like, I'd have to look at the cover again because I don't have it on vinyl, but isn't it kind of like almost like Sgt. Pepper's a little bit, where it's got like a
it looks like a hand-drawn Sgt. Pepper's.
Okay. Yeah, it's a cool album cover. I like the name. I mean, the name does sound like, okay, you don't know what you're going to get on here. Could be a lot of things. Yeah, okay, that definitely is very much like...
We come from the 80s!
Turn the Mona Lisa up front. Yeah.
Yeah. Another album, I guess, when this came out, I did buy it new, based off of Go, and I think I'd heard Come On, Come On.
Yeah.
And at this point, as a lifelong Def Leppard fan, I was kind of getting a little annoyed with them going, guys, longtime fans would like to just hear you rock. Just, again, make that one album that just kicks my ass from beginning to end.
Make 10 goes. Yeah. Do that.
And, and as the years have gone on, I've really appreciated bands who do that. Like, the last Judas Priest album, Firepower, kicks you in the nuts.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean?
It's so heavy.
How fucking old is Rob Halford these days?
It doesn't matter. His voice doesn't change.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
That album is so fucking awesome. Same also with Megadeth. The Dystopia album was awesome.
The Coffin Train by Diamond Head.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a new wave of British heavy metal
listen to that right now.
Yeah, so I get inspired by bands like that, who can muster it up. Maybe sometimes, actually, if we think about it, some of those bands have had other younger members join. So maybe that's the issue, is that Def Leppard, Vivian Campbell joined in the mid 90s, and I don't think that they're utilizing him, to be quite honest with you. He's the guitarist from Dio. He was on all his classic Dio albums. And so I don't think they're really using him to his full potential. So anyways, to bring it back to Sparkle Lounge, whatever the hell it's called. I like certain songs off it, but I do wish it would rock just a tad more,
Yeah, no, I feel that. Well, are we ready, gentlemen?
I've got conflicting dates. Is this 2014 or 2015?
No. I want to say 15.
It's relatively new, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I didn't buy it when it came out, but this is such a weird time in the career to release a self-titled.
Yeah. And can we just talk about the first track on here? It's ridiculous.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Why, when I first put this on, I was like, guys, you are literally just rewriting Pour Some Sugar on Me. Those are almost the exact same notes.
Yep.
What the hell? Like, it's just, it's so, I'm surprised this even made it past the record label guy. This would be like, name a band just rewriting their most popular hit and hoping nobody notices. Like, what the hell?
I mean, a lot of Nirvana songs were basically the same. Anyway, but
sure,
yeah.
A lot of obviously the Ramones and stuff like that. But you know what I mean. But it's like, again, when you have such an iconic, cool, mega hit like that, and then to almost completely copy it. Now, I do like the chorus of "Let's Go." It actually does stick in my head. It's kind of annoying, but I can't get past that riff. I hate the fact that they did this.
This is Freak Out all over again. How do we write another single, guys? Just play that song we love backwards and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I know.
Got it. Perfect. Print it. Track 1. What are we going to call it?
Well, I would say despite the massive amount of self-plagiarism that you have with Let's Go, I think the first 5 songs of this are pretty decent. And like with them calling it self-titled Def Leppard, it makes sense. Like, yeah, we're going to sound like Def Leppard, And the thing that struck me the most too, and it could just be the nostalgic feelings of listening to Let's Go, is it a self rip-off or is it a throwback? There's a lot of ways to interpret that. And I think that one of the biggest things is that struck me because I did this discography a little bit different than I normally do. Usually I'll start on the first record and move my way on. With Def Leppard, I started with this album and I went backwards. And I was struck immediately by how much they sound like classic Def Leppard in 2015. And of course, as I went through, I realized that they had changed throughout, because I was like, oh God, am I about to listen to 11 of the same album, But I found it very, very notable that his voice sounds the same. it is still just as powerful as it was in the 80s. And I don't know a lot of vocalists that have been in the game this long that can do that. I mean,
I think it's because they tour. They've always toured for sure.
Yeah. He's always kept it up. He's taking care of himself, you know? And this is also a band that didn't just totally get destroyed with the excess of their popularity. You know, it sounds to me like they recognized something that a lot of bands that came out at the same time that they didn't realize, that this was going to be their living. This is what they were going to do for the rest of their lives. This was their career. And they reached, you know, critical mass very early on in their career, but they've maintained it in a way that I'm just flabbergasted by. Like they've kept it amazingly consistent for where they came from and where they're at now. Whereas if you buy a new Def Leppard record, I can't imagine a lifetime fan listening to this record and being like mad or upset with it. I don't think it's reinventing the wheel, but I don't think that's the goal either. I don't think that every band has to be innovative in order to be good. I mean, a lot of my favorite bands, all their records sound the same. You can ask Joe, you know, like it's all very similar stuff. I can't claim to be a Slayer fan and then get mad at Def Leppard for keeping a consistent sound, you know, throughout their career.
Or AC/DC or, you know.
Yeah, or Accept or, like any of these bands or even Kiss, you know.
Yeah.
These guys realize after a while that like, hey, yeah, we're not playing out the sold out arenas that we're playing. You know, they're thinking this in the 90s because now they could go play a sold out arena anytime they want.
And they do.
And they do, you know. And so it's really a great lesson in just kind of staying on the path, I guess, so to speak. And so like that's really what I got out of this record, because it was kind of my first jump back into Def Leppard. And from that perspective, I was like, this is actually amazingly consistent. It's not going to win my like favorite record of all time award, or it's not going to be as good as Hysteria or even Pyromania, which I think is probably their best in my opinion. But honestly, this is par for the course, and it's fine. It's a little long, which is something I think they have problems with. I actually really like the album closer, Blind Faith. It's weird too. That almost has like a little bit of like grunge sound to it at the end. And so it was kind of cool hearing them kind of have a little bit more of a modern influence, but it not be done in like an obviously like catering sort of way. Cause now it's 2015, you know, nobody plays grunge anymore. So like, it's fine. You can go in and do that sort of thing. So, overall, I thought this one was fine. I didn't really have any issues with it. And I was actually kind of impressed with it in places.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, I bought this, and again, I'd love for them to just put a little bit more energy, a little more time into the guitars, the riffs, just to maybe again bring back the dream team of Mötley or somebody like that who can kind of hone this down to just, you know, 10 or 12 amazing songs. I think that they've got it in them. You can see moments of it in all of these albums, these later albums here. So. Again, an album I didn't hate, but also too, it was like, I'm still waiting for that one album. Come on, Def Leppard. Come on, give it to me, you know?
I'm listening to this thinking this is modern Def Leppard. Okay, but I'm with you. There's another Hysteria in there. I don't know if Pyromania is in there, but there's another Hysteria in there.
I agree. It'd be nice. But they keep putting out cool stuff though. So, you know, that's what I like about Def Leppard, is that they're really good about going back into their past and releasing special editions of these albums. And you know, like just a couple of weeks ago, my last album here, they released this. So a 1980s bootleg of, this is back with their original guitarist playing those classic early songs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so again, if Def Leppard is putting out this, they know that fans want, you know, they want to bring some of this stuff back. So I don't know.
Well, that's something we didn't get into either, is the amount of re-releases, the amount of like cool stuff that they've just dropped over the years. You know, there's obviously multiple greatest hits, tons of live albums, you know, so much box sets. Yeah.
Yeah. This is really cool because we were talking about Hysteria, where they were trying to release all of the entire album as singles. Well, what they did was they divided the album into 9 sections. And so each one of them makes out a section. And so you can actually build up the album cover with the 45s.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so they all kind of fit together.
That is cool.
That's why you buy two of them, right? You do one to frame and then the other to yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, anyways, I know I
was expecting a bunch of cassettes to come out of that box. Like, here's track 1, here's track 2.
Oh yeah.
We did it.
Yeah, Def Leppard's fun to talk about for sure. I was looking forward to this. They're one of those bands where, again, it's a roller coaster a little bit. You love some of it, you don't love some of it. You know, it's fun to talk about a band like that, you know, and kind of get into the minutia of all that.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate you coming on and helping, because I know, like, when we first started talking about doing Def Leppard on the show, I was a little bit, I almost vetoed it because I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's something that I'm going to want to listen to or go all the way through and all of that. But like having you on here was great, because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about necessarily. And I'm afraid that I'm going to I don't know. I'm afraid that I'm going to say something wrong or something horribly misinformed or something like that. And so it's always helpful to have a super fan on board, because I can tell you the episodes where we've just tried to get through it on our own and maybe I say something dumb, man, the super fans come out of the woodwork then. Let me tell you.
Well, the super fans are going to come out with the Def Leppard, because if you talk bad about them in any way, I think if I'm the one who's supposed to be the defender of Def Leppard, some people might be somewhat disappointed, but I feel like I'm a realistic fan for sure. I think it's going to be, you and I have kind of chatted behind the scenes a little bit about doing a Kiss episode, and Kiss will be very similar to that. I think you'll probably like it more because they are more rock, they are more metal.
They are, yeah.
And also too, I'm dying to know what you think about their grunge album.
Okay, I haven't heard it, but I will.
Oh, dude, you're in for a surprise.
They released an album. Well, it was actually, it wasn't officially, they almost killed it, but it's called Carnival of Souls. If you want to hear Kiss basically writing original songs in the style of Alice in Chains, check it out. It's crazy.
And you were worried about the disco record.
Yeah.
I was worried about the disco record.
They do disco and they do grunge, full on grunge, buddy. And actually the irony is I kind of like it. So.
But I've got it saved to my Spotify, so
yeah, I'm dying to know what you think about that. It'll be pretty interesting.
That'll be a to be continued for sure. But yeah, so this is the part of the show where we kind of take everything we talked about and we wrap it up into a nice little bow. What are your final thoughts on Def Leppard?
Me?
Yeah.
You know, I'm still a super fan, man. It's one of those bands where their Hysteria is on the back wall here. It's one of my go-to albums from the 80s. I still love it today. I still actually listen to a lot of Def Leppard, probably more than my wife would really like.
I can relate to that.
But they're the kind of band too where, a new release comes out and I become that kid again where I'm like, ooh, new Def Leppard's coming out. I'm excited for that, So, I'm lifelong, man. I'm all in, just a couple weeks ago, going to Record Store Day, buying the new live bootleg. So they're just one of those bands where I think that they've stood the test of time for a reason, because people can connect with them. They write decent songs. They're a good time, and they put on a fantastic live show. They did not disappoint when I saw them. So, I like them. They're cool.
Dan, what about you?
Well, this has been kind of an experience for me. This is a band I went into just being pretty sure I was going to hate all of it and that I was going to be like, oh, this is terrible. But as I've gotten older, I've just kind of after a while, man, it gets really tired of listening. I get really tired of listening to records that are like intentionally produced badly because everybody's got some sort of thing that they're trying to prove to everybody else. And I get tired of just straight blasting all the time. It's not that I don't love that stuff, but it is nice to kind of go into a slightly different direction. So I think in that regard, Def Leppard really is cool. And I think that they've got a history that I think you can kind of look at when you're trying to figure out why metal got popular in the 80s. And it's not that they were like some sort of like front runner metal band or anything, that they were like playing 15-minute solos or doing anything crazy. But I think that they, you know, like we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, you know, you hear a Def Leppard song on Top 40, you know, and you're like, wow, this is a lot different than what I've heard before. And I think stuff like that is largely responsible for why metal is so accepted now as a style, you know, and even that's been relatively recently. That people have started to kind of accept metal as this thing that's not going to go away, that it was not something that just existed in the 80s. And I also think that it's really cool how they kind of persevered through all the changes. You know, yeah, we made fun of a couple of records for trying to be, you know, trendy or whatever, but for the most part, though, like these guys kind of stuck to kind of what they do really well. And for that, I salute them. So I think if you want some good history on rock and metal that's responsible for kind of bringing that more into the mainstream, I think Def Leppard's a good place to start.
Def Leppard wrote the book on how to write a heavy metal pop song.
Yeah.
They are the band that I look to when I'm trying to explain why everyone loved 80s metal so much. There was a time in our musical culture where it was about being heavy, but it was about being cool at the same time. And there's a point in there where someone just got whatever was missing and said, that's going to be on the radio. That's going to be the next big thing. And Def Leppard is just really good at writing songs. That's something that always comes back whenever you look at musical trends, no matter what the style. If it's the 60s, it's the 70s, 80s, all the way to 2021. Somebody is going to come along and write good songs. And Def Leppard might be one of the best because everybody looks to them and says, nobody can write a song like Def Leppard. So you're listening to Def Leppard today, unless you're ignoring every piece of radio that's ever been put in front of you. So I don't have to tell you to go listen to Def Leppard, but I want you to. I want you to listen to the songs that you haven't heard because the hits are there, but there's so much more. And that is what I have to say about Def Leppard this week.
Yeah, speaking of which, and I mentioned a little earlier that they have 2 greatest hits releases, and the one that's really fun to listen to is Volume 2 for that very reason, that if you're sick of hearing the Pour Some Sugar on Me and that sort of stuff, listen to Volume 2, because I think you'll be surprised at the stuff that you might have missed the first time around, because it's pretty catchy. There's a lot of gems in there for sure.
Dan, what's your album of the week?
Well, you know, I was going through my Spotify and I was like, what have I been listening to this week? And it was like Def Leppard, Def Leppard, Def Leppard, Def Leppard, Def Leppard. But I did sneak a couple of listens to He Is Legends, Suck Out the Poison. A few times in there because I just needed to kind of I tend to try to palate cleanse whenever I'm doing stuff like this, because you run the risk of like listening to one band for an entire week. You run the risk of just getting sick of it and hating it and then unfairly criticizing it because you're sick of it, you know. Whereas these are records that were released years apart, you know. So that was my palate cleanser this week was some He Is Legend. So it was like the opposite of Def Leppard. It was like gritty and dingy and just like sounds like it was recorded in a dungeon. Yeah.
Metal Jesus, what about you?
I forgot that we do this. I'm glad that you spoke first. So yeah. So I'll do 2. Are we allowed to do 2?
You do whatever you want, man.
Okay. All right. The first one is Van Weezer by Weezer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so this is Van. It kind of goes in line with Def Leppard a little bit. So it's their tribute to 80s hard rock and melodic, not metal, but rock. And so it's their latest Weezer album, came out probably about a month or so ago, and it's got solos in it, and it's got riffs. They do a version of kind of a Crazy Train by Ozzy in there, but they kind of mix up and make their own version. It's super catchy. It's typical Weezer. I'm liking it way more than I probably should. And the other album is completely different from that, and that is the new Liquid Tension Experiment album. So that's
There's another one?
Yeah, there's 3. They just put out their 3rd one 21 years later. So if you're not familiar with Liquid Tension Experiment, it's basically Mike Portnoy of Dream Theater. It's got John Petrucci of Dream Theater and Jordan Rudess. and also Tony Levin. He's a bass player. He's very famous, played with Peter Gabriel and John Lennon, and it's all instrumental, crazy prog rock music. There's no vocals, and it's kind of insanity. It's really cool progressive rock, all instrumental. But it's a really important album because it does reunite Mike Portnoy, who has not been with Dream Theater for 10 years, with the other two main songwriters in it. So it's really cool to hear.
It definitely is sparking some questions.
It is, and actually even more so because the other thing that Mike Portnoy did was he played on John Petrucci's solo album this year as well. So I still think that Mike Portnoy is happy where he is. I don't think he's going to come back to Dream Theater anytime soon. I don't think he necessarily even needs to, as much as I love his style playing and stuff and the energy he brings to Def Leppard. But in the meantime, we do have Liquid Tension Experiment 3, and it's fantastic. It's awesome.
I know what I'm listening to tonight after this recording.
Yeah. You're going to love it, dude. It's killer.
That's hilarious. I'll have to check that out. I've always been kind of on the fringes when it comes to the Dream Theater stuff and the Dream Theater members. But Joe got me to listen to it, and he got me to admit that there was records that there were records that were really good. That was that episode was such an ebb and flow between like me being like, "What are you guys talking about?" and then being like, and then being like, "No, it's amazing, and here's why." You know.
Didn't you have to record that twice? Yes. Do I remember that right?
Yeah. We had to record the second half of it twice. Yeah. Because, the computer failed in the middle of the first one. And I remember calling, we had a guest, John Drake, who he does a really, really great Star Wars podcast called the Nerf Herder Console. And so we had him on, and we must have talked for like 3 hours or something. And then we were like, I had to call him back 2 weeks later and be like, "Hey, we lost half the recording. So you're going to have to come back and we're going to do like the other half." And thankfully he did it. Right. And it was really funny because he's like, we got done and he was like, "Yeah, pretty much went exactly the way that it did last time." And I was like, well, I don't remember. So hopefully it was good. But Metal Jesus, thank you so much, man. This was absolutely a blast. And it was great kind of just getting to see your passion for the band and your enjoyment. I think that's the most fun part about what we do here is seeing people really kind of come alive with music and to see what makes people tick, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So it's super cool. And I think are we done? Did we do this?
Hey Dan, by the way, my album of the week is Dr. Feelgood by Mötley Crüe.
Oh, cool. Hey, Joe. What's your album of the week, Joe?
You mentioned in the very beginning. Okay, so interesting. Okay.
It's becoming obvious to me that this podcast is going to be dipping into some sweet 80s metal from time to time. So why not listen to Mötley Crüe? Because we're talking about the 80s, right? Yes.
I saw Mötley Crüe on that tour, and oh my God,
Jealousy.
It was. I mean, they had the stripper pole dancers up there, and Tommy Lee with his drum kit, and flying over the crowd with his plane. Oh my God, it was awesome.
I hear the final tour they did, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even before that, he finally got his roller coaster drum set. And I hear it failed on the last night.
Oh, really?
So there you go.
Some things weren't designed to go together. Yeah.
Speaking of Mötley Crüe, do you follow the whole thing with Vince Neil and the singer? He's not quite the amazing singer he used to be. Unfortunately, it's kind of sad. So because I'm a huge Mötley Crüe fan, and I'd love to see them. I think they're going to do one more tour. They weren't supposed to, but because they signed a document. Yeah. And so I don't know. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of people. If you read any of the metal news sites or whatever, for some reason when podcasters have been interviewing people, they're like, "So how do you think he's going to do on this tour?" And then of course the person will give their honest answer, and then they'll make a headline out of it. But yeah, I think he's gonna I think it's understandable that somebody's not going to be able to perform at the highest level whenever they reach a certain age either. And I'm not going to get into whether or not it's because he's let himself go or hasn't let himself. I'm not going to be the guy that's like, well, you really let yourself go, or anything like that. But I do think that I think the fans are going to be there for it, and I think it's going to be fine. But you just can't have the same expectations of people, from 40 years ago. I think that's
unless it's Rob Halford.
That's true. And I think after of watching a bunch of Mötley Crüe live performances, it seems like they're performing them in the same key that they originally wrote them in, which, for any singer from the 80s, that is pretty hard to pull off when you're getting older. It's just almost impossible unless you're Rob Halford.
Right. And even then, Rob Halford's an exception to the rule. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think even Iron Maiden plays some of their songs in a slightly lower key. I could be wrong about that, but it wouldn't surprise me. And again, it's completely acceptable,
I mean, Bruce still hits the notes on the old stuff pretty well.
Right. But I'm wondering if it's in the same key, because again, it would be, usually most bands want to lower the key a little bit just so it's a little bit easier for their singer.
Sure. Yeah. That makes sense. I have to look. I wasn't looking for it the last time I watched an Iron Maiden video, but
and honestly, most audience members don't even know. It's
they wouldn't
exactly.
You would never know. So make it easier for them. But
yeah, they're stoked. There's a 20-foot Eddie on the stage. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, super cool. What this is, I can't wait for people to hear this. I think it's a little different. It's out of our comfort zone, and I kind of like it. So
yeah, well, thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun. So,
thanks for hanging.
Awesome.
Is anything cool coming out that we need to know about?
Boy, the only thing that's really kind of new in my world is that the world is opening up again, which is really awesome, because I used to spend so much time going to retro gaming expos, and that was, some of my favorite parts of YouTube and video game hunting. So I'm really excited to be traveling again. So at least this year I'm going to be going to Connecticut, I think. Hartford, Connecticut, something like that. That's going to be one of them that's going to be announced. So I'm going to be going over to the East Coast in November, and maybe some other stuff in October or sooner. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. Yeah, I'm excited to get back on the road and see people again. It's going to be awesome.
Same. Awesome. We're hoping to go out and do some. I've made so many friends doing the podcast, and I never get to see any of them in real life. So I think it was just a couple weeks ago, I actually took a 3-hour trip to go visit somebody that we'd had as a guest on the show. We sat down, had some beers, had lunch. It was great. So I'm hoping to get to do some more stuff like that coming up.
Well, if you guys ever come to Seattle area, I got a place right here. We'll do the podcast live.
100%.
Or at least in the same room. So it'll be awesome.
There you go. Yeah, we won't have to stand. We're totally all here, but we're in separate rooms, separate compartments.
Hey, Dan, what'd you think about this one?
Yeah.
I thought it was great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for checking out this episode. We will have more for you in the future. Stay metal. And that was our chat with Metal Jesus, all about Def Leppard. Dude, that was so much fun. Dude knows so much more about Def Leppard than I will ever know. And I love the fact that he did my job for me halfway through. If you guys were watching the video, he had the vinyl covers just up there. He just pulled them out, and we're like, well, I'm not going to keep throwing cover artwork up on here if I've got somebody else doing it for me. So hats off to you, my friend. Metal Jesus is always a pro. He always knows what he's talking about, and he's a great guitarist, great YouTuber. Check him out if you haven't heard him before or seen him. He's one of the best gaming YouTubers out there. And his record collection is one that I am personally very jealous of, as well as his game collection. But that wraps it up for this episode, guys. There's a lot of different ways that you guys can reach out to us to let us know what bands you want us to talk about. That's kind of a mouthful, but I think you guys are following me here. So you can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at discussmetal. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can find us on Instagram also at discussmetal. You can join our Discord server. Discord is the place to be right now. Everybody's hanging out on Discord. We're sharing memes. We're discussing metal. We're discussing life in general. And Discord's kind of your first place to check for news about the podcast. It's kind of cutting edge over there. So in the show notes for this episode, there's going to be a link to our Discord server. You can click on that link and you will be invited to the wonderful world of Discord. If you would like some sweet discography discussion merch, you can head over to our Teespring store. There will be a link in the show notes for that. This is your last opportunity to check out the old discography discussion logo, because we've got some new ones coming up. and there's going to be some more awesome merch with the new logo on it whenever we get it done. We'll show it to you sometime.
And on that note, this has been episode 232 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Hey, Joe, can I borrow some money?
$1 a month gets you into that exclusive album review feed.